since we're trying to respect the timeline, I think we'll open now the debate. You can address your questions directly to the three panelists. Um, is there anyone to circulate the micro? Yes, please. I would only say, from my point of view, I think maybe one of the common points is the complexity of the situation compared to some concepts that are being vehiculated from outside. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank the speakers for compelling presentations. I have one question for all the three of you and one for Mustafa, but perhaps others can also reflect on it. I was wondering, while hearing your presentation, to what extent rescaling policies are fostering, let's say, opportunities. I don't know if I should call them opportunities, but to what extent they're fostering opportunities for contestation of the established order. And I think we heard that in all three presentations. Maybe if we can develop this a bit, so given this is the title of the panel, and go back to it a bit more comparatively. And to what extent do you think these opposition groups or contestations can be serious threats, or are they just circumstantial happening? I'm thinking about the paper of says on metabolism. Are they just concentrated on a particular policy sector, or can they generate wider mobilization movements? So that would be a first question. For Mustafa, and maybe the others can also reflect on that. Your presentation made me think about time and space. When presenting your categories, on vacuum, non-vacuum, stability, non-stability, I was reminded of the points raised by Patrick Gales in his discussion yesterday about how governance is not constant across territory. And I was wondering how, like within the same nation state, territorialities are not constant. So, and it depends on time. So the same territory could be stable today but unstable tomorrow, and there would be a vacuum tomorrow but not after tomorrow. So I'm wondering how your model would work if we integrate temporality in it and place. Because I think we live in a country where I would not agree with you that there's no contestation on territoriality. I think there's everyday contestation on the parking space below my building.
There's no constant contestation is minimized. It's some sort of like a power balance.
Yeah, I understand that this is the limits of any model. Like if we test it on a specific account of work, but this is really just to provoke you a bit vis-a-vis your work. So I'll stop with these.
Do you want to answer now, or shall we take some additional questions? Yeah, let's take some additional questions since you've taken notes.
What was really interesting, I think, in the presentations is about the attempt of geographers to model. And modeling came in two forms in these papers. The first one was about standards of data that is being standardized according to a Western approach. Okay, and I wonder if there are now attempts at creating an alternative model of data, of what you call mega data or big data, that concerns not the Western capitals as much as the capitals in the South, that were a model that could integrate issue of informality and other practices. And so my question is there now any attempts to create an alternative model of big data? Okay. Then my question for Mustafa, yeah, is that you gave us 4 scenarios, okay, that eliminate more or less the situation in the region. And I wonder, for me it was very interesting because I was able to through these comparative tables that you give us, and on the scales and the actors, which is the civil society, the public authorities, and the market, and intersecting both in order to come up with models of a vacuum, political vacuum. Do you think that these models, these scenarios, could serve as a guidance for political decision making? Because the way I see them, they are now descriptive, analytical, and again, I'm thinking they have a great potential of being operative too, in terms of political thinking.
Thank you. We'll take maybe just one additional question, and then leave the possibility for the panelists to answer.
Is there room for two more?
Yes.
We'll go to Sylvia after me. Okay. Two questions, one to Seth and then one to both Mustafa and Aude. I enjoyed all the presentations. Seth, you said right at the beginning that metabolism was about people reproducing themselves every day. And that, I've read some stuff on metabolism before and I never really thought about this. And I wondered if you could maybe just speak a little bit to how you conceive the relationship between this concept of metabolism and the much more long-standing concept of social reproduction. Yeah. Then the other question, both Mustafa and Aude, you both talked about vacuum as a concept, as an idea in your work that moved along your analysis, and political and policy vacuums in Mustafa's case, and institutional vacuum in Aude's case. And so your papers show the value of that term, but I wonder if you could both speak to what we might be losing or missing in conceiving of these situations in terms of vacuums. I guess it's a genuine question. I'd be interested in hearing more about it, but I guess at the moment I'm not entirely convinced by that particular term. I'm not exactly sure what is not convincing me, but I'm not convinced. So there's something irritating me.
Thank you. Just the last question, please.
Thank you very much. It's a question for Aude. I really enjoyed all your presentations, but just to bring maybe the discussion from this morning, because I think your paper could have also been in our panel probably on decentralization in the MENA region, and I sort of missed a little bit the donor dimension in your paper, so I was wondering whether you have any observations on policy models that might be circulating in Egypt and Tunisia, and you have the privilege of having maybe the possibility of doing a comparative approach to see whether similar models are being promoted in these two countries, and of course whether governments there are even receptive to those, or are they resisting them, or yeah, so I would like to know a bit more if you can. Thank you.
Right, excellent questions. So I have 2 minutes and I'll try to answer 3 of them. First of all, Mona's question. So to what extent are there opportunities for contestation? And I would say that there's no inherently progressive scale of government. So whether or not power is located at the national scale or municipal scale, one will not necessarily be more progressive than another, or preferable. So I wouldn't say that if there's an end run from this kind of the global policy to the municipal scale, and you cut out the central government, that's good or a bad thing. We have to wait and see what happens. But surely there will be a reworking of power relationships, and something progressive could come out of it. With regard to this alliance, it's not very durable because it's really centered on this one thing, this incinerator, and the waste pickers and the middle class residents, they envision a different urban political ecology, or they want a different urban political ecology. The waste pickers want one that allows, or let's say urban metabolic configuration. They want one that allows them open access, free open access to recyclable waste. And the middle class residents want one that like quickly gets rid of their waste and gets it out of sight. Now maybe you could figure out a way to make those compatible, but I would say as soon as the incinerator issue is resolved in one way or another, the alliance will be rather short-lived. This question, whether or not we can have an alternative data set, there isn't one that exists. That's why I propose this method of multi-scalar mixed methods. So you have to do ethnographic research that focuses on practice in order to see where these flows even exist, in order to understand informality. And then once you get a handle on everyday practice, you can try and scale that up into some sort of citywide model. I will say though, that a lot of international organizations, I don't want to give you the impression that there's this big bad kind of conspiracy to write off the informal sector. I think this kind of ISO thing is complete nonsense. But I was at the UN Habitat regional meeting in Asia, in Jakarta. People are aware of these problems and they're trying to figure out how to incorporate the informal sector into models, but it's very difficult. And I would say that these big organizations, although they might want to incorporate the informal sector, they're not very good at ethnographic research, so they struggle with that. But yeah, I think why not? We can play a role in that. And finally, this is a great question from Eugene. What do I mean by metabolisms, and what is the relationship with reproduction? I guess I would think of reproductive labor, if you think of the term the way it's historically been used, it's kind of the labor that takes place at home that facilitates production. So you can, like Silvia Federici, and kind of unpaid labor, historically women's work that kind of facilitates, it props up the mode of production, say, because it allows the family to reproduce itself. I think it's quite interesting now that in a place like Delhi or in Dhaka, 80% of people are not in wage work. Therefore, there's no real production in a kind of classical Fordist Keynesian sense going on. So reproduction becomes much more about getting by in the city and surviving. And how do you kind of reproduce the family if you can't sell your labor power for a wage and you're just trying to exist from one day to another? And I think these conflicts, I think the basis of reproducing yourself in the city is really about connecting to its materiality. And I also think that if you're connected today, you could be disconnected tomorrow. This is something that most people have to think about. Whether you're, depending on, doesn't matter which side of it you're on, if you're trying to tap into someone's electricity and surreptitiously access it, or if you're trying to guard your electricity supply and watch your meter because you're afraid that someone in the next community is going to start to tap into your electricity, this is a contestation that it unfolds every day as kind of this quiet encroachment of the ordinary takes place time and time again and kind of ebbs and flows. So, thank you.
Okay. First, start with one last question about the temporal aspect of state rescaling and the vacuum and everything. Well, I think I read two pieces. One of them was again by Eugene about the time and space and state rescaling. So he should answer that question. Well, no, kidding. No, just kidding. But the second one was, I think was either like one of your readings or, the thing is like the formal governance during the day, the state is there. During the night, it's mafia's time, right? They control the streets. So, but still you would find a regular pattern in the temperature. Someone is filling that gap. There is someone present there controlling the state of affairs. And that those formal and informal regimes, they might be patterned through different links that Seth's other works referring to, especially the last one, right? Or the one before, I don't remember. Okay. But the thing is, it's not simply like those regimes of patterned behavior, people, and the patterns of control over the population and social and economic relations. It's not like that must be, they do not change day and night. There's some sense of predictability. and reduce uncertainty. So you know that there will be mafia tomorrow night. There will still mafia in the street, but after 6 a.m., the police force will be patrolling the night, right? But you know that there is a regular pattern, right? So, but this means that there is reduced certainty. So, knowing what will happen when, people will act and respond accordingly, right? So, so you are right and you are wrong, right? For those reasons. The second one is the. So, I think the question of predictability and the reduction of uncertainty has much to do with the notion of political vacuum and policy vacuum. So that term really speaks to the question of uncertainty. That's why I would associate it with not simply with the lack of a power that controls the territory, but the ambiguity of the rules, rule regimes, or coexistence or multiplicity of rule regimes. Who are you going to really refer to? Who will you see as the ultimate authority? I think this is where the vacuum enters. I'm not saying that there's no one around, right? There are too many actors around. That's when we come up with, and no one is dominant. Then that's when I think we come up with political vacuum. So, well, I thought about in one of your papers about the presence-absence dualism. In a way, political vacuum, yes, there is some sort of an absence, right? Present absence, but that doesn't mean, well, when I say that, I also look through the lenses of the nation states, that they cannot control the population there. So from their eyes, there is some sort of a political vacuum. That doesn't mean that there is no authority there, but probably the nation state and the authority trying to control, the political power trying to control that locality, they are clashing. So this is when there are multiple regimes or parallel state-like structures, right? And about your question, sir, about could those models be used also as departure points to reshape your political strategies? Actually, I've been referring to the political strategies of the Kurdish movements in Syria. They are really political strategies. So, and in the case of, for example, in the case of the Kurdish movement in Turkey, they have learned and copied from the Rojava experience. First, they exported the Kurdish movement's initial principles to Rojava, to Syria, where they found a fertile ground to ripen their project that they wanted to transfer it back to Turkish territory and restructure the states. Right? So they are already used and they are copied by different states. Actually, as I was listening to Oğuz's presentation, the pattern in Egypt is quite similar to the AKP Erdogan's party's strategies. Somehow they are copying from each other. I think they can be copied if you take this as an answer. I think that they are actively being copied now. Different politicals, and those different regimes, they learn from each other. For example, the PYD and the PKK, they are learning from ISIS territoriality, their fight over the territory. And they're using the same tactics in Turkey, right? They learn from their enemies. So the learning process is another complicated one, but I think I should stop here, not to make things more complicated. And just one thing though, sorry. And another, I think, how we fill in the term, like political vacuum. Another one I think would be the gray space by Ananya Roy, right? Gray space, multiplicity of power or parallel structures where the divide between the formality and informality is now transformed into formality 1 versus formality 2. One informal regime becomes formalized and participates in the struggle to topple the other one.
Thank you, Oud. Oud will be speaking in French. If anybody has some difficulty, I'll try to do the translation.
Thanks for your questions. So first, Mona was scaling as opportunity to contest established order. Well, ça peut comme voilà. Ça peut être une opportunité de remise en cause des pouvoirs établis, comme ça peut ne pas l'être. Et là, je vais prendre un exemple que j'ai travaillé à partir du cas palestinien, du terrain palestinien. Dans les années 2000, l'autorité palestinienne avait par exemple promu la décentralisation sous la forme de la régionalisation par des agences régionales de gestion de l'eau, de l'électricité, etc., pour reprendre la main sur des projets qui étaient davantage portés par des maires qui souhaitaient étendre leur autonomie et qui réclamaient aussi des élections locales et qui, eux, souhaitaient que l'eau, l'électricité, etc. soient gérées par des structures intercommunales, par exemple. Donc l'autorité palestinienne, avec l'aide de la Banque mondiale, avait, elle, au contraire, dit que la décentralisation, ça passait pas par des structures intercommunales, par les fédérations, les fédérations de municipalités, mais plutôt par la mise en place de partenariats publics-privés à l'échelon régional et la création de nouvelles régions. Voilà. Voilà, le rescaling, ça peut aussi être un outil des autorités en place. Voilà.
Following, Aude was saying that in response to my question if opportunities promote contestation, that sometimes they promote more centralization through alternative structures, institutional structures at the regional level, for instance, like the case of Palestine in 2000. I think I'll stop at that.
Eugène, your question is really interesting. To be honest, je réutilise en fait le vocabulaire des acteurs. Je n'ai pas vraiment utilisé le terme vacuum comme un concept, ni d'ailleurs réfléchi à ce terme en tant que concept. J'ai réutilisé le vocabulaire des acteurs, mais c'est vrai que j'aurais pu un petit peu plus, et merci beaucoup pour cette suggestion, réfléchir à l'utilisation de ce terme. Parce que dans l'utilisation, notamment en Égypte actuellement, qui en est faite, il y a du coup la volonté de susciter la peur, beaucoup quand on utilise vacuum, et du coup une forte dimension sécuritaire. Et donc c'est une manière d'associer les réformes que l'on promeut à une dimension sécuritaire, plus que d'ailleurs développementale ou sociale. Et donc je pense que c'est important aussi de...
Just to, it's an interesting answer. The idea that Aude is developing is that the term vacuum is actually a label used by the state to promote fear of vacuum, and so it's a very security, military related dimension. So she's using it in that sense of how it's constructed. Yeah. I hope I translated correctly.
Toujours par rapport à la question de Eugène, le deuxième point qui me semble intéressant à réfléchir avec ce terme de vacuum, c'est le fait que quand bien même des têtes sont coupées, par exemple, ou que des institutions sont supprimées, comme dans le cas de la Tunisie ou de l'Égypte, et notamment toutes les cellules locales des partis États, jusque-là, en même temps, le personnel, alors soit politique, soit administratif, demeure et transféré sur d'autres administrations, et que du coup, il y a une culture institutionnelle forgée de longue date dans ces régimes autoritaires, qui un héritage du coup à prendre en compte dans l'analyse. Il y a beaucoup de travaux sur l'Europe de l'Est qui ont, du coup, dans les années 90, montré quelles implications la culture institutionnelle de la période soviétique avait sur la manière dont les cadres administratifs se réappropriaient les réformes. Voilà.
As part of the reform that is promoted, there are a lot of institutions and units that are dismantled, and so that vacuum is also sort of transferred elsewhere, and these employees and their legacy, institutional legacy and culture, and how they move to other institutions have been documented in the case of Eastern Europe too. So she's referring.
la question de Sylvia, oui, il y a des policy models voilà, qui circulent, notamment sur la question des budgets participatifs entre l'Égypte et la Tunisie, mais les donateurs, les donors qui suivent ces programmes, enfin qui les soutiennent, sont pas les mêmes, même si ce n'est pas une question sur laquelle moi directement je travaille, il y a plus de doctorants qui travaillent là-dessus, mais on pourra voilà, en discuter par ailleurs.
Fine. I think I would like to thank all. We have to respect the timeline. Thank you. Yes, you had
Okay, I think after also emphasis on the use of that government was actually using the term vacuum to spread the fear, and so it's like political vacuum is not necessarily, of course. And I found the same thing in Sylvia's where she was talking about the confusion about the three different levels of government, and the king emerges as an arbiter. So you can use policy vacuum, not territorial vacuum, but policy vacuum to fill in the political vacuum. That could be used as a strategy to manipulate the institutions. This is actually what Hitler was doing during the Nazi Germany's state structure, but it's a long story.